Okay, if you are still here after that exciting trailer, that only means one thing, that you are interested in flying the world's most dreaded aircraft, and most flight simulators don't even touch. It's not actually that bad an aircraft, and it's actually a very exciting aircraft to fly. Yet many simmers will never touch this aircraft ever. Not for me. So let us begin with the checks and the startup of this aircraft. And by the end of this tutorial, I'm sure you'll have a full concrete understanding of how to operate this. So we'll start in the flight engineer's panel, and firstly we'll check the battery volts. As so, looking at the DC voltmeter, we have over 20 volts and are perfectly normal for this flight. So we can then request our external power and connect ourselves accordingly. So request external power, and then we will now move the battery on external power selector. It's a three-way switch to external power. Now checking the AC tie, we have 115 volts at 400 Hertz, so the integrity of the external power is good, and we can proceed. The INS, we'll now check our INS. So we go up here to mode selector unit, rotate mode to standby, which allows for quick gyro warm-up, and the present position has already been inserted for us by the add-on, as noted over here, present position waypoint 0. So now we can turn our INS mode selector units to align, like so. And then watch the accuracy index going down from 9 all the way to 5. Okay, carrying on with the checks, we'll come back to the, let's first turn on the nav lights and the logo lights. So nav lights on, and that should be okay for now. Coming over to the flight engineer's checks, we'll start up at the top. The radio rack fan blower is set to norm, bit like the Venturi rack in the DC-9. All the generator, the drive, the CSD drives are all on 0. Obviously there's no generators running. We'll reset our engine generators as so, to ensure that they kick on when the engines start running. Our emergency bus electrical control is in the normal position, and we can also test the rest of the gen lights, the gen fail, the emergency bus fail. Also notice the DC and AC bus ties are in the normal condition, which means joined, not split. If you were to split them at this stage, everything would go off. Now coming down over here, the recirc fans, we can set to auto. We can adjust our lighting as required, and it does make it a little bit nicer. Cabin altitude today, we're not actually going to be flying very high, just about 10,000 feet, so we'll set that over here. Manifold air pressure, when we request external air lock. Also the crossfeed is on the norm condition, which basically means the open under most circumstances. Means that if you increase the load protection pneumatic on the right hand side, it will automatically equalize with the left hand side as well. Okay, coming down here to the fuel, the most dreaded part that most flight sims enthusiasts, even the experts, will avoid. We have 10 fuel tanks on the DC-8. We have 2 center tanks, they're called auxiliaries, forward and center. Then we have a main and an alternate tank for each engine. And we have a 3-way selector, main, alternate and off. We also have 2 crossfeeds, which are not modeled in this simulation. We are going to do a tank to engine feed today, but I put a little bit more fuel on because I want to illustrate the principle of boosting out of the alternates to the mains. On a normal flight, you would first move these selectors down to avail of the tanks. If we had full fuel on board, fuel would naturally gravity feed from the forward auxiliary through here to the sensor wing auxiliary. It will then get boosted up here and down to this lining. We then fill all the alternate tanks like so using the fill tanks and boost the alternate tank quantity into the main by turning the alternates on like so and the fill valves to open. When the outer board main tanks reach 7,000 pounds or less, you can then boost the alternate amount into the main like so. That is a very brief and complete exercise of the DC-8's fuel system as shown over here. And I guarantee you a lot of videos will never show it. Okay, so we'll shut all this for now and proceed as we would normally do. Okay, the main boost pumps we never really use other than for engine start and takeoff for safety purposes, but actually, unless you're flying at very extreme altitudes, you will never use them. Coming up over here, we can test our fire detection system. And cancel. We can also turn the galley power on. Also the hydraulics, the engine driven hydraulics, we set to on and will kick in when the engine was started. We'll test the aux pump and the aileron control manual and rudder control manual lights would go off. This is the hydraulic assist that the DC-8 has, which the 707 doesn't. Okay, the vibration test. We'll test as so. Observe the vibration altitude rising and the engine vibration light on. Engine oil quantities are checked and in normal range. Oil pressure is obviously off. Oil temperature is very low and green range. Let's set the oil cooler doors to open fully while we're on the ground, and then we'll set them to auto after takeoff. System test for the fuel. It tells you all the status of the fuel tank selectors, whether you're using the main or alternate. The blowaway jet is armed, and we are now going to press on with the overhead panel. Same thing again, we can turn on lights if we needed to, but I'll keep them off for the time being. Let's put some instrument lights on, like so. We do get some nice lighting in the cockpit. We can test the aux pump here and watch the blue light come on. So we did on the flight engineer's spec. It's like the MD-11 actually, we have two aux pumps. Now coming over here, we don't need any ADF frequency. We can test erase the cockpit voice recorder, which is not monitored. Let's power up the windshield. Let's test the meter probe and put it off for the time being. The taxi lights, wing floods can be off for the time being. Emergency lights will arm. Assuming refueling and loading has been done, we'll turn the seatbelt signs on. And also ignition for now is off. Start manifold selector set to main. The auxiliary actually used to use a gear oleo strut, but that was quickly discontinued. Now ignition override, I'll explain later. Coming over here, we'll set our altitude reminder to 10,000 feet. And we'll proceed with the rest of the checks, such as the oxygen regulator, which is not modeled. Rad INS switches set to radio. Altimeter is set to 992. Anti-skid and spoiler extend lights are checked. Hydraulic pressure low lights are checked. A lot of these switches don't work. Anti-skid will arm. Gear unsafe light will check, and that is set. And also the autopilot off and rest of the autopilot mode enunciators are checked. Finally, coming over here, we'll set transponder to standby and mode C. Weather radar is off for the time being. And also our rest of our lights for the thrust reversers. Coming down over here, we will turn on our nav radios, like so, and let's put in our waypoints. So we're going to fly runway heading from Los Angeles, heading 252. So let's set the course and the heading. Like so. And our first waypoint thereafter is the Sierra Lima India VOR SLI, which is got a frequency of 11. That's the wrong one. Sorry. There it is. So where did it go? Hang on. It's the next waypoint. First waypoint is give me a moment. Let's search for it. There it is. 115.70. And then the next waypoint is the ocean. Waypoint 115.30. Like so. And then after that we'll make our way to the airport. Checking our autopilot status, the yaw dampers are off, everything's fuel levels are shut off. Aileron and rudder trim and aileron trim is set to 0. And now we can proceed with our engine start. So to do so, we need to connect our external air. And then observe the manifold pressure rising. Like so. We have over 30 psi, so we can start our engines both together. I want to test out ignition override today, so I'm going to put all the fuel switches to the up position from now. Ignition override, it bypasses the startup logic, so we'll arm the ignition and put override. So that means that even if the fuel levers are in the up position, it doesn't de-energize the ignition system. Okay, then we can put our anti-collision lights on, and let's put some floodlights on as well. Okay, throttles at idle, and let us start our 2 right-hand side engines. We're not going to worry about the INS because we're just flying VOR to VOR. Now watch as they kick in automatically because of the ignition override. There we go. Engines number 3 and 4, they are running. And now we can put the low pressure to high if we wanted to. And we can just start the other 2 engines. Let's put our flaps to takeoff. I've already done my homework, so today we're doing flaps 15. Oops. There we go. Number 1 and number 2 are running. We can also disconnect our external power. First, let's move the selector to battery, like so. and then observe our battery volts and battery frequency. And also let's check our generators, Gen 1, Gen 2, 3 and 4, they're all okay. Finally, we can remove our external air and external power. That was a very loud item, by the way. We can dearm the ignition override goes back to off. We can now put the pitot heaters on as well. And we can put our taxi lights on. Let's put the probe heaters on. Test our stall warning, and finally our wing floodlights as well. Now another nice feature in the DC-8 is we don't actually have to sync our generators like how we do in the 707 and 727. We just hit gen parallel. And there we go. They're all parallel. We can now put the Freon compressors to norm. We can even turn on our cabin compressors, but they should be off for takeoff. Main boost pumps are not even needed in all honesty, but they should be on for takeoff purposes. And let's put the air cooler doors to auto. Finally, our galley power, okay, that's all on. Hydraulics is checked. The low pressure lights, they're off. We have hydraulic assist ready for us. And now our trim is, let me see, what did I write down? Trim 2.4 for takeoff. 2.4. Also, the INSs are not aligned. It's taking far too long. Anyway, and now we have a V1 of 103, a rotate of 120, a V2 137, and also a V2 plus 10 of 147. So what that means is we'll rotate, pitch to maintain V2 plus 10, and then at the climb first altitude, first reduction, we'll set our climb first and then accelerate at 3,000 feet. Let's do a flight control check as well. We have full hydraulic assist for our controls. And finally, our flaps. 15. Very stunning livery, this one. Even though NASA didn't actually use the DC-8 series. And let's stop the pushback and start our taxi. Let's turn our transponder as well to TARA. Like so. Weather radar. Let's see, do we need it? It does look very good actually. Maybe we'll have it on. It looks nice. So we're taxiing now and we'll make it to the runway. We also have our little mirrors with our standby compass. Very nice feature. Sadly, our INS never did align, but never mind. We're using VOR to VOR navigation. Static air temperature of less than 20 degrees outside. It's not a very hot day today. There we are lined up with runway 24. Okay, now ready for the takeoff. Okay, so let's advance the throttles. Stable, max power. Okay, 80 knots. V1 rotate. That was a very fast rotate. V2 positive rate gear up. Let's pitch the speed. 147 knots. V2 plus 10. Okay, we're past 1500 feet. Let's set climb thrust. And we're even past 3000 feet. Now let's accelerate. And let's bring our flaps up. Okay, we'll disarm the speed brakes and flaps 0. And let's accelerate away. Okay, now we can turn our cabin compressors on. Like so, and now we'll begin pressurizing. And the main boost pumps, they can go off as well. Okay, let's begin our turn for the viewer. And now is a good time to engage the autopilot to take over. So what we're going to do is go over here, turn the autopilot on. Oops. Like so, and go to heading select. You can also control our vertical speed. IAS hold, a very useful feature, unfortunately is not working. We're approaching 10,000 feet, so we're going to go altitude hold. And we can pull back on the throttles ever so slightly. as we level off. Okay, landing lights, they should be off now. Wing floodlights off. Like so. Taxi lights will go off. We can now put our no smoking and no seatbelt signs off. Okay, coming over here to the flight engineer station, I want to now do our fuel management. So, what we're going to do is we're already doing a tank to engine feed. The main pumps are feeding the main tank, so we are feeding the engines. We have a little bit of fuel in the alternate tanks for the outboards, which I'm going to boost into the mains now. Like so. Other than that, that's everything that we need. We then control our low pressure pneumatic protection system as required. So if our support is also high, we can have more PSI available, but that causes more drain on the system, so we'll put them to low. Our oil temperature is within green range, oil pressure as well, and we can adjust cabin temperature if we wanted to make the cockpit colder. We can also check our generators to see if they are performing. Now let's fly direct to the next VOR 115.30. And we'll now fly direct to the next waypoint and then start our descent. So I'll speed up the sim rate so that we can end this journey faster. Okay, we've approached our last viewer and we can now start our descent towards the runway. So let's find our bearing to the ILS, which is 165. So dial that in. And our ILS frequency today is 111.55. And let's start our descent. So we'll set our altitude reminder to, let's say, 5,000 feet. And let's pull back on the throttles. Let's adjust our vertical speed for a good descent. Let's put the no smoking and no seatbelt signs back on. And let's set our cabin altitude for the destination. Destination elevation is 17 feet. You can also extend the landing lights. That actually creates a bit of drag, as seen over here, between the two engines. Yeah. Okay, we're approaching 5,000 feet. Let's dial ourselves down further. 3,000. Okay, altitude alert, 1,000 feet to go. And as we level off, we'll start slowing down and deploying our flaps for landing. And our localizer heading is 95. So let's dial that in to the course. Okay, leveling off now. And we should start eroding our airspeed and start slowing down. Okay, let's make our final turn towards the runway. And let's get the gear and flaps down. Okay, let's go flaps 15. We're going to land with flaps 35 configuration with a speed of 132 knots. And let's keep descending. Okay, let's go flaps 35 and let's adjust our thrust. Okay, I have the runway in sight. I'm going to disconnect the autopilot and fly manually towards the threshold. A bit high on the glide slope, so we'll descend further. So one hand on the throttles and one hand on the joystick because we don't have the auto throttle to maintain our final approach speed. We'll arm the speed brakes. Here we've got the glide slope and the localizer as well. And now just make our way to the runway threshold. To 1,000 feet. 50 feet will start the flap. and touchdown. Okay, reverse thrust. Okay, reverse lights out. And now we'll just taxi to the stand and shut down. Okay, let's retract the flaps. And we'll pull up to the nearest parking stand and shut down. So now let's complete our shutdown. So the first thing I'm going to do is establish external power and air. And now we'll undo whatever we've done basically. So the mode selector units to the INS, they can go off. And no smoking and seatbelt signs, they can go off now, as well as the nav and also landing lights and wing floods can go off. And the probe heaters can go off. Coming over to the flight engineers panel, we can now set our external power. Let's put our cabin compressors off. And the Freon ones off as well. And our low pressure pneumatic system to off. All the alternate boost pumps, they can go off, and the fill valves go off as well. The galley power can stay on as the passengers they unload. And now we can proceed to shut down our engines and weather radar as well. As the engines pull back, then external power will kick in. And we can also open the doors for unloading. Now, if we were doing a complete shutdown, we would just disconnect all the services and put the battery off. And now the aircraft is completely shut down. Okay, so that's the end of this video of this aircraft, and see you for future videos exploring authentic and aircraft that people and flight simmers don't tend to avoid. Okay.